Thank you everyone for being punctual and being at the April meeting of the Big Hole Watershed Committee. We will do our best to run this meeting without Tana, who usually keeps the wheels on this bus. She welcomed a beautiful baby boy, Luke, a month and a half ago, so she's on leave. And we are, Ben and I, we're kind of keeping the bus duct taped together until she gets back. So we will start like we usually do with a little round of introductions. I'm going to start this way this time. We'll go around and then maybe loop around the back, everybody. My name is Pedro Marquez. I'm the Executive Director of the Big Hole Watershed Committee.
Hi, my name is Nathan. I've been doing social media posts for the Big Hole Watershed Committee.
Federal Board Programs Manager of the Big Hole Watershed Committee. Thanks for coming.
Hopefully, noxious guys for Hagen, police here.
John Whittingham, Basic Biological Services and Billing.
Diana in Wisdom.
Thank you. I'm Warren. I'm the new Big Hole hydrologist at the NRC.
Matt Herberg, DRC. Eddie Smith, Land. Roy Morris, Church Grant, Charlie, and
Elton Miller with the Big Hole Valley Historical Society. And some of our books. Now, Mabel from Glenn.
Martin Magels from Glen, Big Hole River Retreat. Big Duffy from Newton. Jim Denny, Consumable Water. Paul Peterson, Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks, and Peterson Captain. Dave Ashcraft, Twin Bridges.
Kristen Thompson. I am the Wisdom Ranger District for USFS.
Matt Lacey, I'm wildlife biologist for the Deerlodge. Tom Bowling from you.
Danny Bowler, huge.
Ben Stone, Big Hole Ranch.
Susan Stone, Big Hole Ranch, Melrose. Susan Monahan, Big Hole Ranch, Melrose.
Jim Hagen, Barther, manager, Glen. Pete Campersher, Wise River. Stan Struzik, Wise River. John Craig, Divide. Steve Reimers, Divide.
Dominic Montana, Bureau of Mines and Geology and View.
Mark Cambridge, Divide.
Amber Birch, County Weed Coordinator.
J.M. Peck from Melrose. Right, we'll pass around the sign-in sheet to make sure you guys sign in here because we have a full house. We appreciate it.
All right, we will kick it off as we usually do with our stream flow hydro report. You guys want to report from there? Or you want to come up? Okay. Tried to get the focus on this thing fixed, and it hasn't been fixed. Yeah. Oops, now you done did it. No, I did.
Well, Pedro is, I know a lot of you guys had over the Montana NRC. I was the upper Big Hole CCA hydrologist, and I'm transitioning out of different duties, and I want to welcome Caitlin Bourne to the group. She's our new hydrologist up there, and Caitlin comes from a ranching background. She's in Colorado. She recently has been working down in Arizona, and I'm very excited for her to be stepping into a Big Hole, and she's really going to fit in really well with everyone, especially this group. Welcome, Caitlin, and remember she's new, so any hard questions.
Okay. Yeah, it's this thing.
Yeah.
Just full screen it. And then if you want to zoom in more, you can something like that. All right. And you can think.
We're at 99% of median values as of this morning.
The high speed is about 141%. The lower elevations are well above average snowpack right now. Mid-range snowpack is slightly above average, and then the high elevation is also slightly above average. There will be a graph down lower the high speed, but these are all the main hotel sites. Dark Horse Lake, it's got observed 30.6, and then the NRPF median is about 99%. And index is about 9%. I don't know if you know in detail about.
If anyone has any questions on any of these individuals, we can talk about it. You can keep going through this.
There's a high speed. You can see where all the snowpack is as far as elevation goes. It looks really good in the lower elevations. Hopefully it stays that way for a while. Precip is at 94% of median values. The graph of that. As far as the 8 to 14 day temperature and precip, we're looking at about near normal temperatures to below average temperatures, and then leading towards below average and precipitation. And then our seasonal outlook, April, May, and June, we have equal chances of temperature being above or below average, and also equal chances of precip. NOAA has issued an El Nino watch, which means that there's basically a 60% chance that we'll go into El Nino during May through July of this year. And as of right now, we're in neutral conditions.
Yeah, so just for everyone's knowledge, we've had 3 winters of La Nina conditions, typically back-to-back. La Ninas equal good precip for Montana. Kind of a little hit or miss the last couple of years. We've really never had, or I shouldn't say never. The 3-year La Nina cycles are pretty unheard of. So we had, winter started out a little weird, and then we kind of got some good precip in around December. January was pretty dry. And then we've been having some pretty good storms, so that's why we're back up to that kind of that average level right now. We're out of that La Nina conditions, and we're into neutral conditions. So if people don't know what that means, it's based on sea surface temperatures in the Pacific and how that affects climatic conditions, content, and storms moving from the west to the east. And like Caitlin said, we'll be transitioning probably into El Nino conditions. So what does that mean for Montana and the Big Hole? Well, typically El Nino conditions mean drier and hotter conditions. Now, whether that happens or not, we don't know. I mean, it's if we can stay in this neutral pattern for a while, I think that bodes well for us. As long as we can keep, temperatures are going to be our biggest thing moving forward in, late May and June. And then obviously July, August, we want to keep those temperatures down or at average. But, as long as we can keep, a lot of this stuff up high and, have that duration of flow, attenuated out instead of all one big shot, I think that bodes well for that water users across the basin. So with that being said, here's the doom and gloom, like Phaedra and I were talking about. I think we're gonna have a good runoff. I think we'll be irrigation wise for the beginning part of the season, we'll be sitting pretty good. But as late July and August comes, I think probably most likely going to shortages again unless we get some average temperatures and average precip. So don't want to be too doom and gloom, but I mean those are kind of some of the realities that we've been dealing with lately in the Big Hole and Western United States, Montana and Jones. Any questions from anyone? Yes.
Neutral day, is it going to warm up any or be stuck at 32?
Just at your house. Everywhere else gets not kidding. No, yeah, well, we're gonna start to see it. Last year was good and bad. Like it was cold in May, even the beginning part of June, right? I mean, we got some big storms last year. That's the only thing that saved us from having another 2021 year were those cold temperatures and storms last year. But yeah, I mean, it's gonna warm up at some point in time, right? And we're gonna have runoff, but I'll make sure to keep it at 32 at your place though. For a while.
Well, I'd ask.
No problem. Anyone else? Yes, Randy.
Well, I always watch the Old Creek site.
Huh?
And years of precipitation. Years precipitation. And then on that, it's 86%. Is that because?
Exactly, yeah. And you have to remember too, the precipitation is not necessarily reflective of the moisture content, right? So it's different in terms of, it can be really fluffy, light snow, so that content is not quite there. So depends on when the snow comes, how it comes, and how cold it is too. So one thing I think that might benefit the snowpack in the big hole is that we have some cold temperatures, and we had it early, right? So you get snow, and it freezes up hard, and you really get that underlying snowpack that really solidifies. And then last year we didn't have that. We were pretty dry through the fall, and then we got snows. It never really got up to median until later, or actually we're past the peak that we normally had. And so what happens then, you get heavier, wetter snow, which is good, but you have a lot more solar radiation, the days are longer, so that stuff flushes out quickly, right? So I'm hopeful, this is good. I'm hopeful that, with those really cold temperatures that we had earlier in the season, iced up that snowpack pretty hard. It's gonna be a slower runoff, so. Anyone else? All right, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. You're welcome. All right. We got a hopeful hydrologist and we started on time. What shall world? Okay, we'll go on to my report here. Make sure. Is that doing the right thing? Okay. Oh. Yeah. Thank you. Share that thing. Awesome. Okay. I want to run through quick because we've got a lot of presenters tonight for weeds, so I will always try to go fast and then I'll end up talking for a while. So we are bringing on a conservation fellow for the Mount Hagen area. Her name is Allison Allen. She just graduated college in Ohio. She hasn't even started thinking about Montana because she's still wrapped up in graduation world. She's going to have her mind completely blown. She'll be with us from May 15th to October 15th. She'll be staying at the new Willow Creek acquisition on FWP on the game range. There's a house there where FWP technicians will be staying, and she will have a room there. She will be dedicated to Ben's restoration program, a lot in the Mount Hagen uplands and other spots where we need help. Really kind of a field crew person, young, really eager, excited to be out here. She's climbed a couple 14,000-foot peaks, but other than that, has never been to Montana and doesn't know what mountains are all about. So I'm just really excited for her, just for a young person to be at that stage of her life and put herself into a totally new environment. So we're going to take good care of her. There's going to be a little house cleaning on May 12th at that house. There's nothing in it, it turns out. So we've been sourcing used furniture to make sure there's at least something in there for her and the technicians when they get there. If we need, I may put a call out to the board, see if folks have anything lying around. I did grab 2 lamps from the Fairmont today that were being given away. That'll help. I think I got a bed.
The house is completely bare, so. There's
Okay. Yeah, we'll check in with Van and see what we're missing. I think the Anaconda Sports going to chime in with the donation, and I think gave us some furniture, some living room furniture, I think. So yeah. Anyway, not something I thought about till about a week ago when we realized the house was totally empty and the gal was showing up. I was like, oh, we better do something about that. So she's coming out with her family, driving out. We'll be moving in on the 15th. That's the day that the gates open to the WMA. So that's the first day that we can actually get her in there. And she'll go to a training in Bozeman for 3 days and start with us the 22nd of May, and then hit the ground running. So that'll be great. And then we have Peyton, who's been doing our social media for us, bringing consistency, you know, keeping the public informed about what we're doing. And, you know, some of it's informational, but some of it is project focused. You know, we need a lift with some project funding for certain things. The first one that we're going to kind of go with is stream gauge funding. We have about a $4,000 bill from the USGS to cover flows on Dickey Bridge, Maiden Rock, and the Notch. So if flows at those 3 gauges is of interest to you or anyone you know, we will be asking folks to chime in and contribute to try to hit that $4,000 bill. That's, you know, it's been sort of a handshake that the Watershed Committee made with the DNRC and USGS years ago when you all set up the monitoring system and the gauges on the river. And, you know, there's kind of no contract or no obligation, but the USGS just sends us a bill every year. So until that changes, we're going to figure out how to pay it, right? But we'll get that done. So keep your eye out for that. And we're just excited to have more consistency. We did just get trained up on how to sort of better target what we're putting out there and how to maybe target the folks that are visiting the big hole that may otherwise not know about us, and see if we can get, you know, more of the general public contributing to what we do. And so again, I say this quite a bit, but ecologist turned into a marketing person. It's a pretty sad scene. So we rely on smart people like Peyton to get this stuff done for us. Okay, we got on the proposal. Full screen? Okay. On the, oh boy. See, you're gonna ask me. Then I'm at to move this. Okay, I did that. There we go. Now move that, and now move that back. Presenter view. This one. Oh, I see. See? I should just put me back in the woods somewhere. So we got some big proposals out recently this month. The big one was the BOR Water Smart grant. We basically chose, as you all know, we've been working on designs in the Pennington Bridge area. River takes a hard S turn right there because of, you know, old infrastructure and riprapping over the years, and the river lost one of its main channels. It used to split. When they built those 2 bridges, the river split and was perfectly aligned. The engineers built it to where the river was. Now the river is no longer there. Quite a problem. We've been working with folks down that part of the river for a couple of years now, trying to figure out what we can possibly do. I think we have 4 good solutions. So we put in a grant for $1.4 million to get them all done. The design is happening this year. We have money for Great West Engineering out of the DNRC's RRG program. So design for all of those, minus a little bit, is getting done. And then hopefully this grant comes in right on the back of it, and we're kind of on our way. Still, you know, probably, who knows, 2 years out. That's just how long these things take. We won't hear from this grant until December. And then with my experience being the way it is with the BOR, it may be a year until we have a contract signed. I don't know. We can't really make that process move any faster. We got a general capacity grant out to Cinnabar Foundation. And then the America the Beautiful Challenge is being run by NIFWF, that's the National Fish and Wildlife Federation. This is a big pot of money. This is part of the infrastructure bill. And instead of us trying to kind of write a massive application, we're piggybacking on 2 applications that are already going in. The one that went the furthest last year was the Montana Conservation Corps asked for money to boost its sort of restoration academy. So it's putting more young people, kind of like Allison, who's going to be with us, more young people on the ground, more capacity to get folks doing work, a lot of manual labor stuff, weed treatment, erosion control, trail building, that kind of thing. All we're doing is asking them to put a service area around the big hole, so that when that money comes in and they have more capacity, we can direct those folks to us and, you know, get more boots on the ground without having to pay for it. So free labor. I like it. And the other one, the Heart of the Rockies, is putting in a pretty comprehensive proposal for conflict reduction program. So like our carcass compost program and our range rider, we asked for money to continue those programs for 3 years. And I also asked for some money for, what are we going to call it? A mentee, maybe, for Chet, or someone to follow Chet, just with the idea that, you know, we got to continue that program and build continuity into that program at some point. And Chet is such an intuitive person. There's no book on how to do what he does. Someone's got to kind of shadow him for a little while, sort of picking up on how you ride the wolves instead of the cows, etc. I mean, he's one of a kind, as you all know. So hopefully that gives us a little boost and just gives us, you know, gives all our programs some baseline capacity. That's what we're going after. As far as more public outreaching facing things, I participated in the Montana Beaver Working Group. I've been kind of a coordinating member of that group, mostly because of my 6 years of beating my head against the wall with the Army Corps of Engineers and my experiences with that. So I've been leading up the regulatory sort of permitting group. Several posters came out of that. So Fish, Wildlife, and Parks printed some really nice beaver posters, like an artwork about beaver ponds and all they bring to habitats and everything like that. Those are up for grabs. I only had a handful of them, but feel free to take one. That work's going pretty well. The direction that the state is going in, that sounds pretty promising. They're working on getting kind of an inventory of beaver populations statewide. And once they have that, and this is going to be a digital mapping kind of exercise that Utah State is doing. Once they have that, they will identify areas that are good habitat where beaver could be, but are not currently. And so they will, down the road, I don't know how long this will take. The idea is they will have relocation areas throughout Montana to put nuisance or problem beaver. So the idea being that if ranchers are calling up with a problem beaver, they will have already gone through a NEPA process that has cleared these areas so that you could, in theory, quickly that day, potentially grab that nuisance beaver and go take them somewhere where they're not causing a problem and maybe can do some good as far as water storage and things like that. I know all of y'all that are, chuckling about beavers and how big a pain in the butt they are. I get it, but we could also use them higher up in the watershed where it's possible. That's the direction it's headed. Right now, you currently cannot translocate a beaver through FWP. So they're trying to get a protocol established and sort of do a big picture NEPA, because right now you would literally have to do a NEPA process for every animal before you moved it, which would not solve the problem of get this beaver out of here today, right? So they're trying to get to a point where they can do that. In our neighboring states, Washington and Oregon, you should hear the stories of how they manage. I mean, it's like this. I mean, you can, and they train sort of citizen scientists to be able to manage beaver and know how to grab them, put them in a cage, put them in a holding area, make sure they clear sort of some quarantine process. There's things involved with diseases and tularemia spreading, things like that. They've kind of got it figured out in neighboring states. Montana's heading in that direction, so FYI. SB 442, that is the bill that is looking at the allocation of legal marijuana money that you probably heard of in the newspapers. Watershed, there was a letter that went out. That money basically creates a new habitat funding program at FWP. It's a lot of the kind of things that we work with FWP on, so we saw it as a good thing, as a bonus to having a state, more localized grant program that would be able to bring funds to producers for weed control, conifer encroachment, things, a lot of the types of projects that we do. So, you all, governing board, decided that it was okay to sign on to that letter, and that's moving through. Looks like that bill has a lot of support. It's probably on its way. We also signed on to a proposal for an Arctic grayling project in the upper Red Rock Lakes in the Centennial. And that project, if y'all don't know, the Red Rock Lakes are basically, they were wetlands built for waterfowl, not for fish, so they're too shallow. There's not enough oxygen in that lake, and the grayling are struggling in there. So they went through an alternatives analysis, pretty extensive, and couple of the projects they landed on are ways to get better oxygenated water into that lake system so the fish can survive over the winter. We could go way deep in any one of these, so I'm happy to answer questions if you guys have them. We're continuing work on water storage investigations. I won't say too much on that right now. The main thing I got to get to with this meeting is our drought management plan for 2023. I had a couple printed copies in the back, but I sent it out to the board. Our drought subcommittee has approved the draft that we currently have. Major change here is that we are making the triggers at Glen Gauge the same as Maiden Rock. Melrose, sorry. So section 3 and section 4 will have the same triggers, but the section 4 trigger for flow will be the lowest of either Glen or Melrose. And we can go into it. We thought initially, FWP thought that there was a relationship between Melrose and Glen Gauges and about a 40 CFS difference. And after we've looked back over the data, it turns out that there's years when that relationship is actually inverse. So there was no clear relationship there. So the consensus of the subcommittee was just to make those two the same and then go with the lowest of either Melrose or Glen. So those sections are still in yellow in the draft that you have in front of you. I guess we should do it now, unless if anyone wants to have a conversation about it, I think we should do it now, but otherwise, yeah, we are. We're doing 2 sections. Well, the trigger would apply to section 4. Not to section 3 still stands on its own. Section 4 now has 40 fewer CFS before it hits a trigger. Yeah, Jim. Yes, it is. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and then the reopening looks for 4 looks just like 3. Yeah, which is 200 CFS. So I guess I'll put the question out now. For governing board members, we definitely have a quorum. Any objections to ratifying the drought management plan for this year as written? Okay. Love it. Thank you. We have a drought management plan for this year. I've already contacted the DNRC who runs the website that has all this stuff automatic. He's programming, it's a little bit of a programming thing to have it, it lights up whenever 1 gauge hits the trigger. It's all automatic. So he's working on the programming now. I told him, work on it. I think I'm going to get approval, but I might come back to you. So I will give him thumbs up and we're off and running with our drought year. I mean, our excellent snowpack and precipitation year that won't suck. Okay. That's it for me. Tana normally does the wildlife. I will say, just as a quick update, the dump trailer that we got is having some rails welded onto it now. It should be ready really soon. So we're not quite ready for carcass pickup yet, but we should be within a week, and we'll send a note out as soon as we are. And you guys know the drill. John Costa, give him a ring. He'll go and pick up your carcass, take it to Wisdom, and turn it in the compost pile. I will end on that. Yeah, and I'll go with steering committee next. I kind of skipped over to you. Steering committee, and I believe we have a nominee.
Going into this getting streaming, but unfortunately, we really didn't have a lot to talk about. We made a couple changes, adjustments, but they're strengthening everything, so we kind of lived through that with getting the growth. And pretty much where they are now because they're working.
We'll get Ben up here next, And share the new thing, which is this one. And then full screen. There, and I'm gonna minimize all this business. There you go.
All right, guys. So last monthly meeting, my message to everyone was that I'd been doing a bunch of project planning and preparation for the upcoming field season. I'm glad I had that time to do that because this month we had a couple projects happen sort of unexpectedly, which is not a bad thing at all. It just, the time frame accelerated, but because I had all that planning and prep time, I was prepared. So one of the projects that we started this month, we started our 2023 restoration field season, and our program was this Eastern Pioneers Riparian Conifer Encroachment Project. This is on Browns Gulch. It's in the foothills in the Eastern Pioneers. It's on BLM managed land. And a little backstory, we've been working with the BLM. We have a participating agreement with them to do this conifer encroachment work and stream enhancement work. And we're also working with the Nature Conservancy. We have a subaward with them to implement these projects. So last year we did a couple stream enhancement projects on a couple tributaries. And this year we're getting into the conifer encroachment portion of it. And so that's 23 acres on this. This is the unit right here, a little lower down. We're in between Melrose and Glen here. And we started on the 29th of March, and I'm working with an outfit out of Dillon, a gentleman by the name of Justin Hardman. He was a fishing guide, you guys might know him, but around COVID times, he sort of wanted to get out of the fishing guiding game, and he got a nice niche doing this conifer encroachment removal stuff. So good guy to have. And good guy to know because they're making really good progress, but really cutting all the juniper. This is all juniper. This is a really good example of some treatments right after they cut, but this is an aspen colony that we liberated, if you will, and really just making sure that all that riparian vegetation, that vegetation community can not get so outcompeted by all those conifers. So a really cool part about this project is yes, we're doing this conifer encroachment, but we're also going to come in this year and do some more aspen enhancement work, or excuse me, stream enhancement work. We're slated to do about 80 in-stream structures here, low tech, BDA, beaver mimicry structures in here too. So I think it's really cool. And whenever I do these kind of works, or these projects, I really want to do both, right? Do the riparian, do the conifer encroachment, right? And then come in and do that stream enhancement work. So we'll be doing that later this summer, but so far, so good. These guys are moving along. We're about halfway through this reach. This is going downstream here. So we're right about here. I think they'll finish up next week. It's been fun. I've been cutting with them a couple of days, getting out of the office and going and cutting with them and helping them out as best I can. So it's beneficial to me. So yeah. All right, this has been another one that I did this month. It's a beaver mitigation project that I'm working with a landowner outside of the Wise River, the Elkhorn Ranch. They gave me a call and said, hey, I got some beaver, got an adult male and a female who were plugging up my culvert. You can see this culvert is completely plugged up and flooding out the road. Here's the guy's driveway and some concerns about some flooding of his house. And so, hey, they gave me a call and beaver to Seaver to the rescue, right? I've been doing some of this work over the last couple of years and done a couple culvert fences. And I've been working with a gal of the Clark Fork Coalition. Her name's Alyssa Schott, and she's kind of been my person to help me guide through this kind of work. And she certainly helped with this one, but it's really cool because the landowner wants the beaver on the landscape, but he also wants to make sure his culvert is functioning, right? And he doesn't completely battle these beaver. And so what we did was we installed what's called a culvert fence and pipe. It's a combination of two different devices, but the basic idea being that you can block off the culvert with this fence and then set up your pipe here, and this pipe will regulate the height of the pond. So no matter what the critters do to plug up your culvert, that pipe is essentially acting as a drain. And here's a good profile view of the end product here. We fenced off this intake here, fenced off the culvert fence. And so the idea being is that when the beaver do come back in here, they'll plug all this up. They'll raise the height of this pond. and then water will still be able to flow out underneath the culvert. So this is really good beaver habitat. There's a really robust lodge just upstream, and we actually pulled the culvert, pulled all the material out and plugged the culvert, and then guess what happened? The beaver came back the next day, right? They plugged up half of it, and we're like, okay, we need to pull that one more time before we install this thing, and we pulled all that out, and then they haven't been back. I think it's just the timing of it. The main stem is right downstream, so I think they moved shop, but that's okay because there's likely going to be some beaver who come in and fill that hole in that niche, right? So when they do come in, we'll be prepared with this device here. So it's been a really fun project. Been working with the landowner. It's been great. I encourage you guys, if you have any flood culverts, let's talk about it. There's some ways that we can maybe keep the critters on the landscape and meet your needs as well. So I feel like with this project, I'm getting a little bit of some practice doing it. This was a unique one, right? And so this would be the 4th mitigation project that I've done. So kind of getting some of the tools in my arsenal, if you will. All right, this is the Trail Creek Buffer Encroachment Project. I have mentioned this in passing maybe a couple times during our last couple meetings, but I feel like this is a good opportunity to bring it up. We're working with the Forest Service out of Wisdom to implement some conifer encroachment projects, and we're ideally going to get a participating agreement signed between us and the Forest Service to help facilitate these forestry projects. And we're eyeing up phase 2 this year on Trail Creek. Phase 1 was done last year here, a couple hundred acres, I believe, and this year we're looking at 507 acres slated for this year. So Wisdom's just right down here out of the view of this map, and this is Highway 43 going up here. So this is the main stem Trail Creek. So these are our 2 units right here. And the idea being, once we get this participating agreement signed with the Forest Service, we're going to help funnel that money, help get those dollars on the ground, get this project on out in the public. And Pedro and I, and as you guys well know, once we get that money, we're off and running. This project will get going. So from what I'm hearing from our Forest Service people is that this participating agreement's coming our way. But this last month, we had a good sort of team building. We met about the project, and then we all went out and cross-country ski to check out the unit. Of course, everything was under snow, right? But you could still see the trees. Got a little couple arrows here to show like what kind of trees we're looking at. They're small lodgepole pine saplings and really young trees that historically a low severity forest fire would come out and help maintain those and that riparian vegetation structure. Without that, we're left to do some mechanical work. So this is a really cool one too, because I mentioned the fact that we're looking at doing both conifer encroachment removal projects and that stream enhancement work, right? It's a good combination. We're looking at doing the same thing here on Trail Creek. The idea being, hey, we're cutting all this material out. Let's utilize that material. Let's put it in the stream, reconnect the floodplain, get that system functioning properly again, and do some beaver mimicry in there. So that's a little bit further down the line for some compliance issues, NEPA, et cetera. But it's certainly on the docket, and I'm excited about it because I think it's got a lot of good potential. But certainly this forestry component will hopefully happen this year. So we'll be hearing more about that once we get going. All right, other happenings. This is mainly Elkhorn related stuff, guys. So this last month, I pretty much wrote a grant for more planning work on the Elkhorn Mine and Mill, go figure, right? Essentially, I wrote this grant. This is DNRC Reclamation and Development Grants Program. And it's a really good program for Elkhorn, especially because it's very abandoned mine centric. And so it's just the planning grant, and the future project grant lends itself really well to Elkhorn. I think this will be our 4th one if we get it for this planning grant. So there's a lot of planning that needs to happen up there. And this is one of those examples. It's a repository investigation. So we did our soils characterization last year, right? We know how much cubic yards are in around the mill and the whole site. I think off the top of my head, it's about 53,000 cubic yards if you include the old dump site. If you don't include that old dump site, you're looking at around 13,000 banked cubic yards of contaminated soil that are still on the landscape. What are we going to do with that soil? Well, we're going to have to dig a hole and cover it, right? Like you do. And that's the repository. And these guys already did this, right? They did this project in 2003. They got the most of the contaminants, but they didn't get all of it. And there's already a repository on site. So this is the main area. I know it's really small. This is the main sort of mine operation. And then just out of sight is this repository here. So what we want to do is we want to take a fresh look at this repository. We don't want to basically open it back up and add to it, but we want to build a new repository right next to it. And what we need to look at is, are there any fatal flaws underneath the ground, right? Is there groundwater that's shallow groundwater that if you dig into, you're going to hit it? Is there bedrock layer that's right next to it? So you need to do some subsurface investigation. We're going to be working with Pioneer on this to basically do that subsurface investigation and then let us know what's the capacity for this new repository, which is shown in, we're eyeballing up this right next to the repository a little bit to the northeast. So that needs to happen. I mean, again, it's all of these planning efforts are going to eventually get us to a design, right? We're hedging towards a 30% design. To get to that 30% design, we've come to learn that we need to do this repository investigation. So that's what that grant's for. When you talk about putting all the pieces to the puzzle, right? You talk about what in Superfund language they call it an ECA, which is essentially an engineering evaluation and cost analysis that you need to do. That's just fancy language for sort of an alternatives analysis, cost benefit. What are the projects that we can do to clean up the soil? What are our options? How much do they cost? And let's all come to an agreement on which one that's going to be. So we need to do this ECA as well to get towards that final design. And that's what we're going to be working on with the Forest Service. We do have another participating agreement with them strictly for elkhorn related stuff. And we're working to add to that another $100,000. Most of that $100,000 is going to go to the ECA. A little bit will go to the repository investigation. And then a lot, 25,000 is going to go to us for coordinating this project and facilitating it, because we're really the glue that holds this thing together. We've been working on it for a couple of years now, and that's really helpful for us to continue working on this project, keep it alive. So yeah, that's Elkhorn stuff, and then Pedro hit on MCC conservation fellow that we're going to have Allison on. So I've been prepping her summer and getting her geared up for time in the big hole. So yeah, I think she'll be here. Maybe she'll be here for our next monthly meeting. Maybe not. Maybe it'll be the next.
I think it's
time we have here.
Yeah, it might be off.
All right, that's about it. You guys have any questions?
Okay. Real quick, before we have one meant for all their business, or there may be more than one. I had a slide up on my slideshow that I totally didn't talk about. It's only like the biggest professional achievement of my life. We've been working on the smelter site for 12 years. The EPA gave us the final checkoff on this thing. So all sediment coming out of Mount Hanging Uplands and Stuckey Ridge, as far as EPA is concerned, is remediated. And now Fish, Wildlife, and Parks is in the process of sole sourcing the Big Hole Watershed Committee for a multi-year monitoring and maintenance contract to just keep it going, make sure everything we build stays the way it is. And that's really going to fund Allison being up there on the site. And I totally didn't say anything about it until just now. So anyway, it's a pretty big deal. There will be a celebration on site sometime in June. We're nailing down the date. I'll give you more on that. And then I will also, there's 2 days of events happening. One is this Saturday. The Wild Montana Southwestern Wildlands chapter is doing a cleanup. They're meeting at the Divide Bridge Campground at 10 a.m. this Saturday, just to do a local fishing access site cleanup. If you're around, you want to hang out, meet them, give a hand, that'd be great. And then the Seymour Creek Big Hole River acquisition that took place that the Watershed Committee supported. The celebration for that will be Thursday, July 13th. Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation and the Bureau of Land Management are coordinating. It's going to be held at the Sportsman's Campground, and it's going to be a pretty big deal. They're inviting folks from DC, all the reps, all our delegates. delegation and their representatives. Interior Secretary was invited and all the politics starts happening about, well, she's coming and he can't go, and then if he comes and she can't. And we don't know who's gonna show up, but people will show up. It'll be a big deal. They may be looking for 100 hay bales for people to sit on temporarily. If anyone does rectangular hay bales that are small enough that can be transported. There may be an opportunity to rent those out for a day. If anyone's interested, I was trying to think about who actually does square bales anywhere around. I couldn't think of anyone, but just let me know if that's something that you'd be interested in. Okay, new business. Would you like to stand or sit or come up or? Roy would like to do the introduction, okay.
Historic Society, and he produced the first.
That's from Jackson and Wisdom, and then I take care of from Divide up to Wisdom. Decided we needed to gather the history of this area before it's forgotten. So we put the first book together, and then COVID came, so we weren't able to work too much more, but we started the second volume. The first book is 1806 to 1930, and the second volume will be 1930 to 1980. But we just still have some older history in it that we missed on the first volume. We're going to be down in Dillon pre-selling the second volume on Saturday. And all the monies that come from these two books, we have a scholarship set up for all students from the Big Hole Valley, from Divide up through Jackson. We did do one scholarship before the COVID, and then we missed a couple of years. And this year, we're giving our scholarships are $2,000 each, and we're giving it to Brianna Sampson of Weiser. We're real honored to give it to her. She has a 4.0 average down at Dillon, and has a hardship case. Her father was killed a couple of years ago, and so she's sort of on her own at this time. And so we're hoping that people will be interested in this book. There's all types of stories in it. The people from Jackson and Wisdom, they've lived their lives, and their ancestors have come into that valley, homesteaded. And I'm not originally from this area, but my husband is, and his family came into Dewey in the 1880s. That's where I live. And then most of them came in for mining, and then they went on to homesteading because a lot of that mining is very dangerous. And so there's homestead stories, there's all types of story memories. There's some tragic stories in there. In the first volume, we have the story of the flood, and we have the history of the dam at Divide. I think you'll find it very interesting. And we brought the first book down, and it originally we're selling that for $60, but as a promotion for tonight, we have it on sale for $50. And the second volume is $75 at this time, and it will go to publication the end of May. So we're hoping to have it by August 1st, and then we'll be putting that out. I am the editor of both books, and I work with Ruth Nelson Little. We're the two main ones doing the work. And she was born and raised in Jackson, but now lives over at Gold Creek. But she has a trove of history from her family. She's related to everybody in the Big Hole. I found that out as we're doing this book that everybody's related. And the same with my husband's family. It was the Lawrences and the Millers, and they're related to the Bacons. And so everybody knows everybody here. But I do appreciate you letting me come here to show this book, and hope you're interested in it. And the main thing is for those scholarships. We want to make sure that these students all have an opportunity very much.
So unabashed marketing, we brought these books. There's some back there, there's more. If you don't want to buy them today, you can just scan this QR code and it takes you right to the building bookstore. Debbie will hand them back to you, so it'll be $60 plus, I think $6 in shipping. If you'd like some today, we have them there. And great gifts for somebody, great gifts that for anybody that's coming new to the valley, to give them an idea of what the culture is like. So you can contact me. There's a couple extra sheets if you don't want to do it today. There's a couple extra sheets for the card. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, any other business not on the agenda folks want to bring up? Oh. Okay, let's have a little break. We got trees over here, we got coffee over there, and I'll call us back in to talk about weed control in the weed hall. Thanks very much, everyone. Batteries, by any chance? We're gonna get updates on weed control measures. And we're starting with Mr. Copeland. You're up first. We've got a lineup. We've got about 4 speakers today, so bear with us. We're gonna cover a whole lot of ground. Mr. Copeland.
Hey guys, I'll try to be brief. I'll try to be brief here. Anybody want to guess what side of the divide these photos are from? That's from one side of the divide. That's from the other. I work on Hagen, so this is near Hagen. And this is on Hagen. Anybody have any idea? I bet you all know, right? I spend most of my time on this side. That's an old photo though. That doesn't look like that anymore. It's been retouched, but there's a heavy metal dust devil for you from the old days. How do I change the slides?
Oh, you gotta do it on the machine. I can do it for you.
Yeah.
You just look at me. Give me
So I've been working up on Hagen since like 2003. Now I work on Policer too. And I worked back in the day with Fager and say, so I used some of the old names and I stuck around long enough that everyone else retired or died or got better jobs. So now I'm a man. And it feels great, let me tell you. So back in the day, as you know, it was a little weedy over there. It was either fairground or weeds, right? And they had no weed plan, but they had a ton of money. So what they did was somebody would call and complain, or somebody would get a pet project going, and they would spray. And they would spray, and they would spray, and they would spray. And while they were spraying one area, they would ignore all the weeds everywhere else, or they would ignore the fact that the weeds were spreading. And that's just kind of how it went. And this is a map of, we got Willow Creek here, Cabbage Gulch here. This is an old, this pink right here, fuchsia or whatever you call it, is the knapweed infestation. The yellow is leafy spurge. You can change it. Somebody didn't like the knapweed of cabbage. And so they sprayed, starting in 2009, they sprayed for 11 years. Every year, they sprayed a couple hundred acres every year for 11 years. They finally managed to kill a lot of the knapweed, but it took 11 years. Who knows how much money? We try not to keep track of that. And they did manage to get rid of a lot of the weeds, a lot of the knapweed. In the meantime, the white top took over. That's the blue, and you can see it started out as these little dark blue patches here, and then spread to these dark blue lines, and then spread even further. And of course, no one complained about it, so they didn't spray it. They were just spraying the knapweed still. And same with the Dalmatian toadflax, that's the orange. Now in 2022, that's what they spray. We finally got them to start spraying the white top, but by then it was too late, right? So Luckily, in 2018, we wrote a weed management plan for the Big Hole Watershed Committee, and we managed to stick with it a little bit better. And then you can, it's like, and then as these guys mentioned, Vanna is now in charge, or the FWP has the money and the reins. And so we can actually follow the weed management plan. And what the weed management plan is going to do, this is what it has to do with the Big Hole, is instead of willy-nilly spraying chemicals on the Big Hole or on the Clark's Fork side, which is heavily infested anyway, we're going to focus on stopping the spread of weeds, controlling small infestations, trying to re-veg the damaged areas towards the divide and on the Big Hole side along California Creek, and scouting and mapping weeds. Now, weed sprayers don't make as much money. They're humping chemicals, they're scouting for weeds, or I get the good job of walking around and mapping weeds. And we don't spray nearly as many acres of weeds, but we actually do some good. So it doesn't look so good when you do your report, like, oh, we only sprayed 10 acres, what's wrong? But we're actually preventing the weeds from spreading into the Big Hole. And now, of course, with the advent of the RV and van crowd over on the Big Hole side, now I get the joy of driving around to every dispersed campsite on the Big Hole to look for weeds getting spread. That's the new thing. But so here's Cabbage Gulch. Here is what happens if you overspray an area for 11 years. You end up with a lot of bare ground and a lot of dead and a little bit of brush. You can see, I mean, this was bare, then it was covered with knapweed, then it was sprayed so much it was bare ground. And now we have white top moving in like crazy. It loves it. And there's still a little bit of leafy spurge here. There's Vanna and her assistant. We put in some Vitafix plots, which I'm not, a little beyond me, the chemistry of it, but it's a non-chemical, it's actually a nutrient that they're trying to control noxious weeds with, and it's showing some promise, but we're just putting in some, we put some plots in for Dalmatian along Mill Creek, and they put them in for cheatgrass. I wasn't involved with that. Now they're putting in some white. You can go to the next slide.
And Stuart's presenting next month on this product. It's this micronutrient cocktail that he's developed.
Now that's of course not on the Big Hole, right? But it's a lot easier to control knapweed when it's one plant. And I get a hiker and look for that. In fact, I can just pull it, although it's already gone to seed. So now I got to map it, go back there every year. But if we just left it, it would turn into knapweed. Go to the next. Now, I just wanted to show this because you guys maybe are kind of like this. Please don't lynch me. I put biocontrol insects on the leafy spurge on Willow Creek. Now, no one took it upon themselves to spray Willow Creek every year. And so it looks different, but I think it looks a heck of a lot better. You guys may disagree, but as you can see, we got leafy spurge, but this is actually declining. The whole drainage was filled, all the grassy areas or, fair areas that were timbered, covered in yellow around the turn of the century. We put bugs out by 2005, it's in decline. In 2007, just a little bit there, but you can see, or maybe you can't see from this bad photo, but the whole area is now knapweed, except for certain areas that the bugs were so quick at killing the leafy spurge, they reached a real population density that they created bare areas and dead stems that were quickly colonized by cheat. And there's actually, you go to the next slide, and then now you guys are going to be like, that should be sprayed, right? But there's no possible way to spray this knapweed out. The seed bank is 100% knapweed. The seed bank of knapweed seed has a 10-year half-life, right? And so even if a knapweed plant only lives 2 years, So you can think, oh, why don't they didn't spray? Well, sure, you spray all, kill all knapweed. Next year you're gonna have a new crop. Next year you're gonna have a new crop. Next year you're gonna have a new crop. And so we did, wow, and I put the bugs in the knapweed. Biocontrol insects on knapweed have proven highly effective in certain areas. You guys might remember the Bitterroot when it was all pink, late summer. You know, it's what do they call it? Bitterroot alfalfa. People love that. You know, they get a bale of Bitterroot alfalfa into their horses. But you know, people with their little 20-acre ranch, that's about that. But so we're seeing what happens with biocontrol. Now, of course, there's not much else seed-wise there, so it's going to be knapweed. But we did have some Dalmatian come in. But since we're actually out there looking at the ground, somebody saw it before it took over completely, and we had the FWP or maybe the MCC crew come in and spray it, and they got it, and there was just a little patch to control it. So that's what we're trying to do. Next slide. And then moving further up towards the Continental Divide. This is all the reclamation work that Pedro's doing in Upper Joyner and Upper Muddy. What was I going to say about that? Oh, anyway, I wanted to say one thing about knapweed. This is where you guys might think of nuts, but that knapweed provides an important ecological role. All right, it is building up soil. It is preventing other weeds from colonizing the area. Now, knapweed is an enemy we know. These new weeds are an enemy we don't. So I would prefer to have knapweed.
Why don't you turn around and get them plants that I used to get around, hold them down, and like the first, where it's down, because seed rot. You gotta remember one thing. You got over here. Up there around the top. And all of a sudden, over here is over all of a sudden, here's a goddamn pile of house shit. We plant going like that. Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, the elk, you know, they're they bed down and they don't have any choice. Right? There's nothing else up there. But I mean, the thing is that knapweed's there, right? It's not going. It's around, right? This is the last stronghold of the knapweed in a way, you know, like I've watched it disappear from thousands of acres. I've watched leafy spurge disappear from tens of thousands of acres, but it's still around. It's not going anywhere. You know, you can try to kill a patch of leafy spurge. All they're going to do is end up with a burned patch of ground ready to be colonized by some other plant, and it won't be a native unless you reseed it with natives, but even so. But anyway, you know, it's like plants are.
You should be able to find that. See?
Well,
The product in the Bitterroot, the honey, it produces honey. That's where it comes from. You just be able to buy it by the bag.
I could make a fortune selling knapweed seed from up here. I collect bugs up in Willow Creek, you know, and I end up with a net full of seed. It's crazy if I wait too long, you know, when those. In fact, I did this last time I spoke here. If anybody needs some of those root weevils, the cycloquins and 80s, I collect them up Willow Creek, Urbana, put out on Fleecer. We're about done. We have them everywhere. If anybody needs any, you know, we always give them away. So anyway, this knapweed provides an ecological benefit, right? The pollinators like it, bees, but the native pollinators, it's food and it's building up the soil. There's nothing else doing that. You know, it'd be nice if we had native plants, but we don't. So that's what we got. So it's better. And you know, I know that John, he's going to come up here and he's going to talk about Lacey and her work on erosion, like knapweed promotes erosion. Like if you have a napoli patch, there's so much worse erosion than there would be if it was native. But the point is, it's not up there, right? It's gonna be bare ground and it's gonna wash away. But so up here, this is where they're doing a lot of reclamation work. And strangely enough, exotics like fertilizer, they like tilling, and they like to be around people, which I guess isn't that strange. They're from Europe, you know, they do better than natives with fertilizer and everything. So we tried to get all the noxious weeds out of this area before the reclamation started, but we had, you know, Pedro and then they had, you know, this reclamation had to occur. So they did it, and we're trying to keep the weeds. We're trying to eradicate the weeds on the continental divide. That's what our weed plan calls for. Once you move up these drainages, it gets towards the divide. The native vegetation is much better, but there's still some areas that are getting reclaimed. And the plan calls for eradicating all noxious weeds, but it's taking a while in areas where there's reclamation occurring because we're tilling up the ground. And there's the natives are coming in really well. They've done an incredible job, but at the same time, we're still working on eradicating this stuff. And it's hard to get to. We got these young MCC crews who don't want to pump in chemicals. They get up there and do it, but we got to do it here. It's not going to be done for a while. And then the
Next one.
And then of course, here's Sugarloaf. This is what these guys call Little California Creek, and here's California Creek right here. Here's the Mill Creek Road. So a big part of the plan is to keep the weeds out of the big hole. And there's some, you guys, you know, I always thought that the big hole is like this area. Native wildflowers, haystacks, but it's got a few weeds in it. And so sorry about that, but we're mapping the weeds, sending the crews out. We're doing a little bit of biocontrol on some leafy spurge here. And we put bugs on the knapweed here, even as we try to spray it out, because it's pretty low density, but well spread out, you know. So every year we go back and we hike around. That's the plan, and the plan seems to be working reasonably well. The weeds are actually diminishing in this area of, I guess this is part of the injured area.
It is, yeah.
But it's been checked off. It's just part of Mount Hagen now, right? But it's on the big hillside. And I'm hoping to stick around long enough that I can see these areas reclaimed, revegetated with natives or desirable species with no noxious weeds. There's always going to be probably a little thistle because it's, you know, thistle's thistle. We don't want to spray the frogs and toads on the creek, but I would like to see these areas reclaimed with no noxious weeds. And then, as I mentioned, the other part of the project is to follow the RVs around and the vans around and pick up their weeds as they spread them. So, any questions?
All right, thanks, Jeff. All right, where are we going next? It's just, oh, you know, I love that. Yes.
All right, Paul Peterson, represent Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks. I have a little bit different. I work with Jeff quite a bit. Not too bad. Some of our wildlife management areas I have a little bit different. I call it the sledgehammer effect right now. We finally have a lot of funding to go into Fleecer and Mount Hagen to spray weeds and some of our fishing access sites along the river. So I'll take you through some of our plans for the next 5 years here and then what we did the previous year. So Mount Hagen in 2022, we treated, sprayed with herbicide approximately 500 acres via backpack and ATV. That was mainly roadside and known heavy infestations. And then on Fleecer wildlife management area, we sprayed approximately 1,500 acres and 684.56 acres of that are helicopter treatment. 815.44 acres from our backpack treatment. And then we had an interagency cooperation with Forest Service, so we got $17,000 worth of weed sprayed on Fleecer WMA across the fence on the Fleecer Wildlife, or across the fence on Forest Service property. So that was what we did last year, and now the next 5 years is where it's going to get a little bit wild. So we capitalized on this Habitat Montana funding going through with recreational weed money, and I was pounding down every single door up in Helena to get money thrown at spraying weeds up on the big whole watershed here, and I got a lot of it. So coming up, so this upcoming year, we have another 700 acres being treated with the helicopter, $30,000 worth on Fleecer WMA right here, and that will continue into 2024. And then in 2023, 2024, 25, 26, and 27, we were putting $55,000 every single year and approximately 18,000 acres for a total of $268,750 worth of weeds getting sprayed all across the Fleecer Wildlife Management Area. If anybody wants to look, I have all the treatment maps and the funding allotted to each treatment project up across Fleecer and Mount Hagen. If anybody wants to steal my binder and take a look at all the different treatment areas that we got going on up here. And on the Mount Hagen, the new addition, they were doing really, we got some people getting housed right now. This fall, we're having a one-time treatment with a helicopter. $35,000 of that is coming from Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation matched it at $35,000 for a total of a $70,000 treatment going across that new property. And we're going to follow that up with in 2023, 24, 25, 26, and 27. We have $43,750 every single year for the next 5 years, which would be 41,252 acres on Mount Hagen and going to be treated for a total $218,000, $218,750. And then on our fishing access sites, fish trap, we have a private contractor that's going to go in there and spray all the fish trap every single year for the next 5 years. And then all the others, I believe we have a county co-op deal where the county is spraying next to it, they'll go in and spray all of other fishing access sites. And then something that I'm sure Jeff is probably a little more concerned about is how are we gonna stop knapweed following all of these treatments, because you can't just throw money at it. But the way I look at it is Mount Hagen and Fleecer have been forgot about for so long when it comes to actually putting good herbicide treatments up across there. That's why I call it the sledgehammer effect. The next 5 years is we have the money. I am going to get some weeds sprayed up across there. And then our plan after 5 years is to go in and do soil and veg tests. And we're going to figure out, we're planning on doing Nutrifix and Edifix treatments all the way across Mount Hagen and Fleecer to rehab all of those areas so the knapweed doesn't come back. So we come back a little bit more on what Jeff was saying. Nutrifix and Edifix is a micronutrient fertilizer. And what it does very well is, since it's a micronutrient, it makes all of your annuals and your perennials absorb it way too fast. So it kills all your knapweed and cheatgrass and many of your other invasive weeds. Most of our native species are actually biennials, or whatever you call them. And they absorb it at a much slower rate. So it allows all of our natives to outcompete all of our invasive weeds. So the plan is after this 5 year of what I call the sledgehammer treatment, we are going to go up there for the next 5 years and we are spraying tens of thousands of acres of weeds all the way across Fleecer and Mount Hagen. This all just got approved through legislature a couple of weeks ago, actually. So good news on that front. And after those 5 years, we're going in there, going to do soil tests, and we're going to put Nutrifix and Edifix all the way across it. And we're trying to get this pushed through as well. We're trying to range drill all of our natives back into all that landscape so that when we do put Nutrifix and Edifix up across there, it will allow all of our natives to outcompete all of our cheatgrass, all of our knapweed, and so on and so forth. That's kind of what we got going on. But at that compete. So got any questions, let me know, or if any of you guys want to look at this there.
I mean,
Yeah, well, depends on which one. Our new addition up in Mount Hagen, that one is gonna be a spring treatment, and it's gonna be followed up by a fall treatment this fall. So we'll have whatever, I think it's June 10th is when we're planning on, and they're essentially gonna broadcast that whole, I mean, I don't know if any of you guys have ever been to our new addition, but I mean, it's 99% now. We don't know if you can find a blade of grass growing on that thing. So we're gonna go up there, and like I said, sledgehammer effect, we're gonna spray that whole new addition with the helicopter broadcast whole thing on June 10th, and then we're following it up this fall with ATV, UTV backpack application all the way across it, and that will continue every year for the next 5 years, all the way up across through the whole Mount Hagen, but you know, if any of you guys, like I said, if any of you guys are interested, I've got all of our treatment maps and everything sitting in here. I've done a PowerPoint, so I didn't know I was gonna make it to this meeting until about 4:30 this afternoon, so if you got any more questions?
You can send us the electronic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll at least get them in the minutes that go out to folks.
Yeah.
So is there any benefit then, as you're going through this treatment? Is it silly to seed at the same time or seed immediately following your treatments?
I think you're.
Or are you just gonna lose it, the
I think
investment?
one of our main seed is so that's just kind of sissy. So
Yeah,
I mean, if we go up there and seed it while we're spraying herbicide on it every single year, it's just not gonna have a chance to.
it's just not, it's just too, yeah. Yeah.
So that's, we're working with Kelvin Johnson, who's kind of statewide, called the botanist, we use a lot of our soils on that 30 property. But after these 5 years, we understand that after these 5 years, the soils are gonna be, they're gonna be hurt a little bit, but I mean, we're looking at, I mean, we're hoping we can get rid of up to 85% known knapweed stations all the way across our counties. And then after that, we'll be following it up. We're still going to keep herbicide going on the places that we know that there's knapweed infestations, but the places that we've eliminated it, instead of allowing the knapweed to come back through, then go through, range drill it, and put the Nutrifix Editors drill that in well.
Yeah.
And we'll allow all of your native grasses to essentially just help repeat all your knapweeds still left over in the soil.
It worked really well at Cabbage. I mean, when they hit that knapweed intensely at the beginning of the project up there, it went from 6 foot tall knapweed, 4 foot tall knapweed to nothing. And when they got there, they were going up 3 times a year, I think, but
So,
yeah, it does the trick.
The Nutrifix and Edifix stuff, that, I mean, we're talking about Stuart Jennings and whatnot.
Yeah.
I can't express enough how unbelievable that is. I mean, it's impossible for the private sector to be able to afford it. It's just miserably expensive right now. Yeah, from our test plots that we have up on Fleecer, we got some now in Blacktail, and we put some on Dome Mountain down in Gardner, some in Rock Ledford. And we're looking at, in 1 year, an 85% reduction in cheatgrass population in 1 year.
Yeah.
I mean, but what that stuff does is to just wipe out all your perennials.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, all your natives, they just thrive right through. So, pretty amazing what that stuff does, but until, I don't know how they, at some point Stuart said the price is gonna come down once they.
Yeah.
Once they're proprietary. Their patent thing, once their patent expires, then every company in the world is gonna get a hold of that blend, but I mean, tough on, it's gonna be tough on them, but it'll bring the price down because you're gonna get a lot of people that are producing it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And Stuart will talk a lot more. It's a great selling point for next, I'm pretty sure it's next meeting that Stuart's going to come and give a talk in depth about these products.
Yeah, so a couple of other things that kind of coming down the pipe a little bit that I've been kind of trying to push up to the higher levels above me, but so we're talking really about the Habitat Montana funding. So first year when we first had recreation weed get passed, or recreation marijuana, we were expecting it to be about $20 to $28 million is what our estimated revenue off of that was going to be. So we had 35% of that tax money that goes right back into Habitat Montana. In year one, we had $68 million show up in our account. That is where all of this weed treatment money is coming from, and so on and so forth. So, yeah. But, so something I've been trying to get a little bit of traction on, that you just might be hearing about at some point, is we're trying to put something together where we can actually utilize that money on anybody that's enrolled in block management. So if anybody's enrolled in block management, depending on the amount of 100 days that you allow, you have a allotted number, or a allotted amount of money that you can put into your private property for weed treatments out of that same account. So yeah, that's about it. I'll go over to the next person unless anybody's got any more questions.
Every grade factor has.
Not as bad. Water gulch up here had a little bit of houndstone, but we had Terranova at Dillon go up there and treat it last year. I mean, it was a fall treatment, so I've been able to see what has happened this spring, but I haven't seen the houndstone years bad on this side. But that's another kind of positive is, so it sounds like the WIP program is, you'll be able to talk to this more than me, but there was a lot of concern that was going to become no more because it sunsetted it. I believe it was the January legislative session. And then it actually passed with flying colors through there, which it sounded like he wasn't going to be able to, but I believe Representative Ken Walsh, I believe, was the one that kind of headed the charge on that. And it sounds like we're green lighted on the WIP program to continue for another 10 years or something. Oh, that's great. But see, I would like to utilize, granted, I don't have to deal with the paperwork side of it like she does, but the WIP program is unbelievable in the fact that you're not spraying weeds just on certain property type, right? So this is one place where I guess I get frustrated, is I can put, say off this one right here, and I'll just say blacktail, for instance, but I can put $70,000 every single year in spraying weeds. But if the people around us aren't spraying the weeds as well, I mean, what's going to end up happening? The great thing about the WIP program is instead of spraying weeds on the police or W, we're spraying it up on Forest Service, and every single private neighbor that we have around us is in on that program as well. So you actually get substantial changes on a landscape scale. That WIP program is pretty amazing. It sounds like everything's green lighted to go on from here. So, you know, if you guys get some custom FWP property next year, or I don't even know, it might not even have to include FWP property. Yeah, it should. I mean, if you get a little group of all your neighbors, Forest Service, BLM, or whatever it might be, you get kind of a group you put together that's willing to, you know, kind of track your weed treatments and whatnot for several years. I mean, you can get a lot of it funded through this WIP program. So just something to look into. Any other questions? Not much of a politician. I apologize.
Right. Amber's saving herself for last. Are you going on? John's on here. This guy. You're up, sir. You just give me. It's right here. You got a little. I got laser. Or you can.
I gotta cut right through the crap here on this because these people are gonna kill me if I keep here too late. We're still gotta go, but.
They never killed me. I've kept talking for hours.
What Paul and Jeff talked about, I think I can maybe complement some of their conversation. But I will have to skip over a couple of these slides. So my company, my wife and I started this company almost 27 years ago. And we've been in this restoration reclamation game for over 30 years. Can you hear me pretty well?
Yeah. Are there many Zoom people on?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's why it's for the Zoom.
I might be speaking too loud now.
No,
So we've got 30 years of experience with this, and you know, I personally have about 2,500 applicator days using herbicides. And our approach is revegetation is an equally important part of the control strategy, and I'd like to complement the idea that we need to look in the big picture in the long term. The bugs are going to be something that in the long haul are going to take care of these problems, but we still have some tools with the herbicides. Next. A lot of our work is in revegetation. So if you're working under a mining projects like we do a lot, you're obligated to revegetate at of the disturbed ground within a couple of years. And this criteria doesn't really adequately cover what we're trying to accomplish. I do a lot of work in Colorado as well, but so, you know, some people would say this is over 70% vegetation. Montana DEQ and their stormwater pollution prevention planning process, they are not concerned about nuisance and obnoxious weeds, as long as they're not listed on the state or county control list. So in this particular case, we're still in compliance. This is a watch list species at the location that I can't disclose, and this is easily over 70% vegetation cover, but it's all mustard and black henbane, neither of which are controlled. So there are some concerns about, is this adequate ground cover to comply with some of your mining regulations and some of your revegetation standards? That's not a desirable species. Okay, next slide.
Yeah.
I really have a dislike for knapweed, and it's part of how we got into this restoration and reclamation game. So a little bit of knapweed facts. You know, it spreads on an average at 27% per year. So, you know, we're looking at a phenomenal rate of spread, and you might argue whether or not that's accurate, but it's well, I will let me. This is the rate of spread. It's, you know, in documented scientific literature. I'll touch on some of that you just brought up. It is, by many people's definition, allelopathic, so it exudes a toxin that kills the surrounding vegetation. It changes the soil character, changes the soil chemistry. And it changes it to its own benefit. You know, it's taprooted, very competitive for soil water, which leads us to some of our concerns. And then Jeff mentioned Lacey. You know, this is where I really took a dislike to knapweed. You know, we've got some good scientific test plot literature that shows that indeed soil loss is greatly increased with knapweed as it displaces your bunch grasses. And I think this is what's most relevant to, you know, some of the objectives of the Big Old Watershed Committee. These are old statistics, but it's an expensive problem. Okay, so, you know, that's also the bottom line for a lot of people. You know, here's your taprooted knapweed, these are some bunch grasses. It's not hard to see how the displacement of bunch grasses can result into significant soil loss and erosion. So, you know, the exact numbers might be arguable. And when you get into monocultures, which we'll see, you might argue that there are some redeeming benefits to knapweed, but I don't embrace that position. So, you know, this is an example of what Jeff was referring to. You know, if you've got a problem that's 10 acres, 10 years later, you're going to have nearly 90 acres. You don't want to wait. And so, you know, being aggressive, sledgehammering is very relevant. You know, we replaced, well, I didn't replace, but this screen was replaced here, and it didn't take very long at all for this infestation to spread up valley, and this just jumped the highway. These are actually adjacent sites and become a full-blown monoculture of knapweed. And so it does literally kill a lot of native vegetation. Next. I have a whole slideshow on cheatgrass, but it also affects the soil, the chemistry, the soil biota, and it, because of its very shallow root mass, has also the tendency to promote soil loss, especially with an increased fire frequency. You see native vegetation. There's tens of thousands of acres in Madison Valley, cheatgrass, and there's hundreds of thousands of acres in the Great Basin of Northern Rockies. It's probably North America's one of the greatest biological concerns that we face is the rapid expansion of cheatgrass. But we'll go into that some other day. We definitely need alternatives to, you know, decades of herbicide use. Our approach is the reseeding, and I'll talk a little bit about the residual of the herbicides and how soon you can come back. There are some other technologies with bacteria and fungi. Insects are well proven to be highly effective. In agriculture, we see mowing and hay, especially when you deal with Canada Thistle, something like that. This other stuff is more site specific, residents.
That's the battery.
Okay,
Now you can talk loud.
okay, now I'll talk about, next slide. Biocontrols, we know that this particular species is very effective. Jeff had touched on it. And so we need to start convincing people when we're dealing with watershed scale problems. And bugs are an important part of the tool. This is an old figure, I think, as of today, I'm looking more like $1.70 a bug. So $1 to $2 for these bugs, that's not cheap. Okay, neither are the herbicides and the manpower to use herbicides. But let's make sure this is near the top of our list, if not on the top of our list for some of our watershed scale problems. You know, if you're dealing with construction sites, mine sites, then herbicides are highly effective and practical. But when you're talking thousands and hundreds of thousands of acres, it's just physically impractical and fiscally impractical. Next slide. This is some of what I present in these restoration and reclamation forums. And we really don't have time to touch on pre-emergent versus post-emergent. Your selective herbicides, your non-selective, non-selective pretty much kills all the life forms. Sterilants are something we see a lot of use on industrial sites and utility sites. It doesn't really relate to our objectives here. Next. And systematic versus contact herbicides. Again, it's got to be on the scope of what we're trying to focus on today. Next slide. Okay. So the question of synthetic herbicides, most of these are acids. Herbicides are mild acids. And I might try to instill a little controversy here, but we're basically dealing with carboxylic acids are the vast majority of what the products on the market are now. I've used several types of organic herbicides, D-limonene at 70%, that will burn your skin. It'll eat up your valves and all your spray equipment. If you inhale, it's an organic product, but if you breathe a little of that vapor, you will have an autotomic response that will just shut your airway down. And so it is, even though it's organic, doesn't mean it won't kill you, it won't hurt you, it won't burn up your vegetation. But most of the organics, almost all of them, are contact herbicides. They burn down the top, but they don't translocate into the body of the plant. And so the utility is limited, but it's still one of the tools that we need to consider. So let's keep organic herbicides in the ball game. Let's not forget that they're part of the toolbox. But these D-limonenes, these citric acids, they're pretty darn tough on people too. And I'll talk a little bit more about whether or not we should be really concerned in terms of health risks with carboxylic acids. Aspirin's a carboxylic acid, vitamin C is a carboxylic acid. Let's go to the next. I apologize for just ramming and jamming through this, but we got to move on.
It's good, man.
Okay. So, when you're picking your herbicides, you need to make sure that the species control is on the herbicide label. Okay, so that requires you as the applicator to do your homework. Next slide. This is what I like about the restoration and reclamation industry is, we were talking about replant intervals. This is a very popular product. Metsulfuron methyl is the active ingredient. It goes under the trade name Escort. But when you're dealing with bunch grasses, a lot of your native grasses, you need to consider that you can't replant for two to 4 months because of the residual that will inhibit the germination of the seed. So, this is a scheduled process. Now we get into some really long-lived herbicides, like the old days Tordon or the chloric acid. You were looking at 180-day half-life. And if you're doing that kind of application, you really never have an opportunity to reseed. And so many of our native grasses are sensitive, not only in their 2 and 4 leaf pair growth stage, their cotyledal stage, but it inhibits their germination. So when you're putting together a revegetation plan, you want to pick the right herbicides, and you want to keep in mind, when can I come back and seed after I've done the application of the herbicides. So it's a scheduled event. Next slide. Yep. Again, we're talking about health risks and dealing with young people and old people that are using these products and how dangerous are they. Okay, so the EPA has a hierarchy of toxicities. Category 1 is extremely dangerous, small amounts. Category 4 is in some cases practically non-toxic, but very low toxicity. The vast majority of the herbicides are category 3 and 4. Okay, so we're going to put this into context. Okay, are these things really dangerous? How dangerous are they? It's not so much a matter of whether they're poisonous, because we know they're poisonous, but are they carcinogenic? Are they teratogenic? Do they affect cell development in different ways? Now, our EPA protects us through all 10 to 15 years of getting these things on the market. They claim that they're not allowing carcinogens to go into the market. Now, we have reason to believe that that may be in question. Next slide. But we're going to have reason to do this. Category 4. That's a heck of a lot of ingestion. 500 milligrams per kilogram. I mean, these are big. 5,000. Yeah, 5,000 milligrams per kilogram. You couldn't eat that much. I mean, so these category 4, category 3 toxins, you would have to very ambitiously try to commit suicide if you were using one of these products. The other ones are highly toxic. So what are some of the highly toxic products that you enjoy on your daily life? Caffeine. Does anybody use caffeine in this room? No. Yeah. But you had a palm full of caffeine, pure caffeine, and you ate that, you would die. And it would be a gruesome death. This would eat up your innards really quickly. Same with aspirin. Now we know that a large dose of aspirin, let's say a bottle of aspirin, will kill you flat out. And it would be another gruesome death, internal bleeding. Okay, so according to our EPA, you guys can't see this, OSHA, Advanced Topics in Neurotoxicology, this is a category 2 toxin, caffeine. Now, nicotine is really killer. I used to chew tobacco when I was a teenager. I thought it was really cool, but I for a variety of reasons, got off of it. And now, lo and behold, I'm an adult, and I find out nicotine is a category 1 toxin. That stuff in a pure form, they're making herbicides out of nicotine now. Neonicotinoids are the big issue now with insecticides. So, let's keep this in perspective. I'm not endorsing any products, but Milestone, category 4, lethal dose, 50% of the population, greater than 500 milligrams per kilogram. So it's a very mild poison. Most people are confusing toxicity with carcinogenicity. It's not the same thing. Teratogenic effects to unborn children, mutagenic effects to the DNA structure, those are different things than just poisons. Okay? Or category 4. So let's not freak out about using some of these products. You still use your PPE, you still protect your workers, you take care of your people, but don't get overly freaked out about how dangerous these are if you come in contact or you spill it from your backpack spray. Next slide. A lot of what we're struggling with is the persistence. So you've got Floran, which is the old Tordon, great product. It's kind of outlived its usefulness. It's been displaced, but these are very long half-lives and they greatly inhibit your revegetation potential. Okay, so if you're trying to reclaim a mine slope, that's a poor choice. We don't use a lot of paraquat in America, DDT. We might make a lot of it, but we sell it to other countries. Okay, so 2,4-D, you're a fairly short-lived, but not a very systemically effective product. These other things are insecticides, basically. A whole different game. Okay, so this is kind of fun now. We do a lot of mowing with weeds. We do a lot of spraying. We do a lot of industrial site work. Next slide. 1 year after treatment, 2 years after treatment. This still looks like 4 years after treatment. This little enclave here is this little enclave, and it's still free of Candida thistle. And that's using the aminoparalid product. Excellent product, short-lived, compatible with aquatic organisms. So choose your poison wisely. I mean, we've known that since we were kids. Okay, next slide. Let's monitor. Test plots. We found a lot of good luck with mowing and then later in the season coming back and using herbicides, especially Canada thistle. Diminishes the root reserves, it depletes the plants of carbohydrates, and then you hit it with a mild acid like aminopyrrolate or milestone. You got really good results, but you need to prove that to your client. And so test plots are really handy to have. Next slide. You know, this head cut is in a knapweed patch. This is a revegetation site over in the Madison Valley. You know, the native wetland seed took off very robust, and it's a recovery of the site. In 1 or 2 years, we had excellent revegetation. One of the things we're doing in the stream and river restoration game is that we're encouraging our clients to come in before they do the river restoration. You know, if you're doing sod mat replacements or reusing some of that, knock down the population of your Canada thistle before you churn everything up and whatever your bank reconstruction technique is. Lower that population of weeds the year before, 2 years before, then you go back in, you haven't spread it all around. It's paying off tenfold on a lot of our projects. Now, again, some people are less comfortable with using herbicides in the aquatic environment, but the EPA and the state of Montana, they allow certain products to be used in the streamside environment. Okay, they have lower toxicity to aquatic organisms. Next slide. Jeff was talking about the down and dirty of it all. Backpack spraying is a great tool. I think the conversation Jeff and I had is if you're paying people by the acre, which means you're paying them by the ounce of product used, they're going to overuse that product, or it's likely that we could. And it's not that people are dishonest. It's just bottom line means bottom line to a lot of people. And so think twice about how much of this product you want to put on the landscape. We have one client that, you know, this wetland restoration, he has stood up to the county weed board people and said, I'm paying Basic Biological to spray less chemicals, not more. So, you know, precision applications, being smart about it, but it isn't going to make sense in terms of dollars per acre. And these are smaller projects. I mean, we're not talking about, you know, 10,000 acres. We're talking a couple acres. So the scale is important. But adverse terrain, we're trying to get rid of the weeds in advance of the mine expansion. They're going to salvage some topsoil, then they're going to spread that topsoil around if you can reduce the weed population. Jeff talked about the half-life of knapweed. Well, most of the knapweed seed germinates in the first 3 to 5 years. And if it's buried below a certain depth, like say a ½ inch to 3/4 of an inch, it may not germinate at all. It needs light, it's photosensitive. And so you can get a leg up even on these really long-lived seeds. Ounce tongue's got a 2 to 3 year seed life in the soil. We can get caught up on that pretty quick. You got 20-year seed life for knapweed. That's going to be a longer game. Next slide. We do have fun. If, you know, mine sites, restoration sites. Next slide. Timber sales. Got to get in there soon after. We did a lot of work on Mount Hagen for Vanavacadori for about 3 or 4 years, spraying weeds when they did all of that lodgepole pine harvest back in 15-ish, something like that. But we found out, you know, they wanted us to come in hot and heavy, beat the ground really hard the first year, spent a lot of the budget. The weeds didn't come on till like year 2 and 3. And so it was admirable to be aggressive, hit it hard, but a lot of the thistles didn't manifest themselves, didn't express themselves fully till a couple years after the ground disturbing activity. A lot of your sites are accessible by arduous means. Next slide. We do a lot of cutting. Believe it or not, we've got Phragmites in Beaverhead, Madison County. That's that thing you find out in the Midwest. It grows 10 feet tall. It's like reeds. It completely displaces all your herbivory. That's not common, but these are hot springs. This is around Beaverhead Rock and Beaverhead Rock Park. And so we got a sickle bar on the brush cutter. And don't hesitate to use these kinds of clearing saws, large string trimmers, if you will, but this has got a saw blade on it. in places where emergent springs are discharging right into Blaine Spring Creek, which is the primary spawning channel to the Madison River. So you've got mechanical tools that you can use when you're really up against, water's literally flowing out of the bank. It's return flow from the pivots. It hits a clay layer, comes ocean right out into Blaine Springs. That's probably not a great place for herbicides. Next slide. This is my boss, the founder of our company. But anyway, we got places out near Kilgore, Idaho, where we, have been doing long-term project work with mapping, monitoring, all that stuff. And then Lima Peaks, it's kind of like range, alpine. It runs the gamut. This is actually really fun work. And this is really exciting, kind of cutting edge stuff. Like, how do you get the vegetation back into your site after you put herbicides on there that last for 2 years? And so this is cool. And I can't wait to see what Stuart Jennings is doing, because that's another breakthrough of what the toolkit we have. I think I'm about one more slide. Yeah. Okay. So anyhow, thank you. Awesome. That's my wife, my boss, and Pedro, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John.
Thank you, folks.
And we've got, speaking of the boss, we've got Amber coming up to play sweep here. You're cleaning it up.
Right. Can everybody hear me okay? I will do my best to project my voice. Maybe I can do that fairly well. So
Yep.
For those of you that have not met me, my name is Amber Birch. I am native to Dillon, born and raised in Dillon, Montana. If you are from the area, my dad was Carl Dietrich. He had the Hitch and Post sporting goods store that was in Dillon for a long, long time. So right next to the club bar. So hunting and fishing is definitely in my blood, and Beaverhead County is my home, and I anticipate it to be my home for the rest of my life. So I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. A little bit more about me. I have 2 kids. My oldest is Asher, he's a freshman in high school, and my youngest is Elena, she is a 3rd grader. They're pretty dang important to me. They show pigs through the summer, so that's kind of what we live and breathe for. Pigs showed up last week, and here we spent a lot of time. They're pretty fun animals. So I am the Beaverhead County Weed Coordinator. I started with the Weed District in 2001. I became the assistant in 2003, and this is my 6th year as the coordinator. I worked with Jack Eddy for all those previous years. So I had a very good mentor and friend in Jack, which has, I hope, given me the foundation to be able to be the Beaverhead Weed Coordinator and help you guys. So what I'm going to talk about is what we do as a county, what projects we have, and what we can offer you guys as landowners in the Big Pool Valley. So hopefully that will be a good way to end the night. A couple of these guys did talk a little bit about the different types of weed management between revegetation, biocontrol, herbicide use. So really using all of those tools in the toolbox together with an integrated approach is what gets us to the end goal faster. Are we ever going to get rid of weeds? No, they call it job security for us, but we do try to improve the landscape as much as we can. Ultimately, that's our goal, is to leave the landscape better for our future, better for our kids for tomorrow, instead of taking away from that landscape. Many of you are ranchers, so you know if you don't have the landscape, you don't have that grass growing, you don't have a livelihood. So weeds, I think, are pretty dang important to you guys in managing those. So as a county, Beaverhead County is roughly 5,700 square miles. It's huge in comparison to other counties in the state. We're by and far the largest. Fergus County is the 2nd largest. It would have taken Fergus and Petroleum County combining to make them the largest county. So we have a lot of ground to cover, clear from Chief Joseph Pass over by Wisdom to Reynolds Pass or Red Rock Pass in the Centennial Valley. So it takes pretty well all day to drive from one end to the other. We have some beautiful country though. So within the Beaverhead or the Big Hole Valley, last year we had a number of projects. We were able to partner with the Forest Service on some RAC projects, so the Resource Advisory Council. So that's essentially tax dollars, payment in lieu of taxes that's then available through title funds or on the ground projects, which includes weed projects. So we had a commercial applicator that worked on the west and north Big Hole Valley roads, as well as our crews covering those roads as well. We had a commercial applicator working on the East Pioneers. So around that Cherry Creek down towards Argenta or Birch Creek, that face of the East Pioneers, which does impact a few of you guys through that area. We had a project in the Pioneer Scenic Byway. This is, I believe, the 6th or 7th year that we have funding either through RAC or support of the Forest Service to be able to have crews specifically targeting the Pioneer Scenic Byway that connects the Wise River area clear over to the Grasshopper. It's a very largely recreated area, and so it's a very much important to keep the weeds from moving within that corridor. We've also targeted weeds through RAC in the Titan Gulch, Triangle Gulch, and Quartz Hill. So I think this is the 3rd year out since we did about a 200-acre aerial project in that location. Last couple years when I presented, I described it as, sorry guys, view quality knapweed, because there was a lot of knapweed. I was actually very surprised. When we did that 200-acre application, that area looks much different today. I have seen in multiple cases that being one instance, but then also down in Little Sheep Creek on the south end of the county, where you have done a large aerial project on pretty well solid knapweed with milestone, and those native perennial grasses have returned to those sites. They were laying dormant within the seedbed, and by removing the knapweed, it really gave those plants the opportunity to come back and flourish. So that's really cool to see. Ultimately, we want to have those plants there to be able to then compete with those invasives and keep that system free of invasives. We also, the big project that we do along the Big Hole is we have a commercial applicator, actually 2 commercial applicators that work along the river corridor. So it's 100 feet on each side. There's been a lot of focus in the Wise River area. 2 years ago, we were able to put some money on the upper end around Wisdom and work from Wisdom towards Wise River. And then last year, I believe that we put around $10,000 on some of the lower section around Glen. So thanks to Randy for working with the commercial applicator and getting him to some of those areas. I believe this year, some of our plan is to work on this area around Divide. I know talking with Mark Cambich, there's some problem areas around here. So if you have areas along the river corridor that we need to address or we need to get a commercial applicator in, please give me a call. We can help coordinate. If I don't know where to send that commercial applicator, you know, we're missing places. So please let me know. We'll do our best to be able to plan for that. Part of the reason that now we have a little bit more flexibility of where we can go with those grant dollars to the Noxious Weed Trust Fund is 2 years ago, the environmental assessment that we had written for that particular project only really covered the Wise River area. 2 years ago, I rewrote that environmental assessment to be able to cover the full length of the Big Hole River. So then now that gives us that flexibility to be able to address those areas. So I hope that's a good thing. I hope that's a win for us all. What else? Oh, 2 more projects that we partnered with the Forest Service. So the fires from 2001 in Alder Creek and Trail Creek, we were able to offer $45,000 contracts for each one of those fire areas to have applicators go in, treat weeds and map. I have not seen the paperwork yet, but talking with the gals from the Forest Service, we're going to offer that same contract this next year. So after a fire, the chance for invasives to spread or invade those areas is very high. So we need to address those now. Make sure I'm not forgetting anything in this area. So coming up for 2023, we're going to continue some of those same projects with the Scenic Byway, Quartz Hill, Triangle Gulch, as well as the West and North Big Hole roads. So that's what we're kind of doing in this area. Other things that we do as a county that we can provide to you guys, if you have need of equipment. So if you don't have a sprayer but you need to treat some weeds, let me know. We have sprayers that we rent, anywhere from a 25-gallon ATV sprayer to 200-gallon slide into the back of the truck type sprayer that has the capability to have booms on it. So if that's something that you need access to, or that would be helpful to you, let me know. We have a lot of spray days scheduled. There's a list in the back. We can bring that out here for you guys to use for the day. If I bring them out for the day, I usually don't charge anybody for them. That's kind of a service that we do for you guys. On those spray days, if you come to a spray day, we're there to be able to help with plan ID. We can help you assess your area and see, come up with a plan of maybe what you could or should do in your area. We can provide you some herbicide. We can fill your tank that day. If you want to come join us, we're always looking for folks to come spend the day with us. That's really what I like about my job, is being able to work with you guys side by side. I've met some very great people. We're fortunate in the area to have lots of good people. We also have the ability to put together cost share projects. So throughout the county, we have cooperative weed management areas where we have to have at least 3 adjoining landowners working together with the goal of weed management. They come up with a plan. We can apply for grant dollars to cover up to 50% of your cost. That can include application and herbicide costs. If that's something that interests you, let me know, and I will do my best to help you get that submitted and help you build that project. I'll put on a different hat real quick for the weed whacker ball. So the Big Hole Cooperative Weed Management Area, we get the grant to have that commercial applicator along the river. The weed whacker ball is always in September. This year in 2023, we have it scheduled around the calendar for September 16th. All the money that is raised at the weed whacker ball goes into noxious weed management within the Big Hole Valley. So we do that through supporting that commercial applicator along the river. So 10,000 last year went towards that. We provide cost share to landowners. So if you've done some application or purchased some herbicide, we can reimburse you and help you out with that, as long as it's for noxious weed management. And then we also put on trainings and education for you guys as well with noxious weeds. So I think I've talked just about enough. I did bring some calendars and some weed ID books for you. If you want one of these, you're more than welcome to take them. Take a couple. Second to, it is the last page. Last page, my phone number is the second one listed under Beaverhead County. Okay. So, or you can find, if you're not from Beaverhead County, your coordinator's number should be listed. If you want to call me, I'm fine with that too. So I'm always available. Yeah.
Question, last year, there was a lot of discussion about the railroad expanding their reach. Is there an update on that?
Yeah, so actually I just spent the last 2 days in Boise with a meeting with Union Pacific. So Union Pacific, if you haven't followed my saga, I have a few gray hairs right here from Union Pacific. Beaverhead County has put Union Pacific in what we call non-compliance. So the state of Montana, as a landowner, you are required to manage noxious weeds on your property. It's within statute, within the County Weed Act. Union Pacific, we could not get to control, couldn't get them to do it. And so we put them in non-compliance. So we do the work and we bill them. The meeting that we had yesterday, we still have to go through that same process where we're at least talking. So we want you to put us in non-compliance because that's the way things are going to get done, I guess, is where we're at. Yeah. So, yeah.
Points you guys for applicator choice.
For tonight? Well, unfortunately, I have to pre-approve that or get it pre-approved through the state. Yeah. Yeah.
Never mind, I'm exploring that.
Okay.
I can't get through it.
Yeah. Whereabouts is it?
It's between the bridge going to the Big Hole and the Big Railroad.
Okay. Okay. Is it on the railroad right away or is it off the bridge? Okay. Okay.
do it in the river.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay. Okay, okay. So Dale has been the coordinator in Madison County. I think this is his 3rd year. I know they don't get this direction very often. I will visit with Dale, but likely what the agreement will end up being is I will try to get my crews in there or I have a truck that has a 600-foot hose. If I can reach it with that truck, I'll give you a call and we'll try to figure out exactly where it is so I can make sure to cover it. Yeah. Is it right along the river? Okay, yeah, that's a good plan. So the weed board will award that contract like the 3rd week of May. So when we know who that is, that's a good plan to be able to get that contractor. Okay. Okay. Okay, well, and a lot of times the applicator that we get for the river, he has a boat that he floats. So he can access pretty much anywhere you can get a boat to. So, yeah.
I just found out about this last year, and Madison County, Beaver County have a cost share where they'll essentially cover 50% of the cost of cleaning up their
Yes and no. So the other thing, I guess, to Beaverhead County, mill value between counties is very, very different. Madison County mill value is 100,000 plus, and the weed department, I believe, gets 8 mills. Beaverhead, they might get 6. They might have access to 8, but somewhere in there. Beaverhead County mill value is about 23,000, and we get less than 4. So you do the math. We don't have the ability to be able to provide that kind of cost share. So that is why we do the landowner grants and cost share as much as we can through the Noxious Weed Trust Fund. So that's where I've been able to really help landowners. What I can offer landowners in areas outside of those CWMAs is $250. Yeah. So much less, unfortunately.
I didn't realize.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this guy pretty much pays for the.
Yes, we're hoping that with the solar farm that may do 2 things. 1, reduce individual property taxes, but increase the mill value. We have 2 or 2.5 voted mills for the weed department. Those will actually should increase more than the regular mills. So I don't know what that amount will account to, but every little bit helps. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Where are you on traffic for Canada fiscal budget?
That's done. So the Canada thistle rust is at this point in like a testing stage. So there's been a number of sites that have been put out. I believe they're re-inoculating all the sites that they currently have. I'm not sure if they're adding any new sites. I can check with Melissa, and I know I just did a survey of what our biocontrol needs are, and I put you in there because I know we had talked about it, but I haven't heard back from her yet. So I don't know if they're putting any new sites out. We do have 1 site of Canada thistle rust at Poindexter Slough. So if you're down fishing it or walking your dog at Poindexter Slough and you see Canada thistle that looks like it's got black spots on the underneath side, or it smells like lilacs, that could very well be the rust, and it's doing very well. We had another spot that we put it out at Henneberry Cabin on BLM ground, and it's not doing well there. Yeah. As far as hound's tongue, so Mogollonus crucifer is the one that does really, really, really well. In Canada, it's practically wiping out hound's tongue. I think the petition is being prepared, but has not been submitted yet for that to be released. I would say we're a couple of years out before we may see anything for it. The sister to it that I believe attacks the seed head or the flower, it has been approved. It just does not work as well. When you look at the maps of the distribution of Mogollonus crucifer, it is all around us. So it's very likely, we're hoping that we will find it in Beaverhead County. We can't move it, but we're hoping that it's there. And very likely we may see it in the Big Hole first. And I say that because the closest place that I know of is at Georgetown Lake. So it's not too far from us here in the Big Hole. It really, I think, is a game changer when it comes to hound's tongue management. Yeah. Hound's tongue? No, hound's tongue has a huge taproot. Yeah. Yeah. And what the Mogollonus crucifer does, it lays its eggs and they burrow down into that root. And when you open that root up, it's just totally chock full of the larva just eating away at that root. It's pretty cool.
It's similar to the root weevil, like root weevil.
And that's been a little bit of a hang up with Mogollonus and getting it approved as a biocontrol. There is it a Hyceum? Does that sound right? Plant that is endangered in Washington. There's a population in Washington. And so they've been studying populations of not that particular Hyceum and some that are living in the same area to see if there's any feeding from Mogollonus on those plants that are closely related to the endangered species. And so right now, I think they're analyzing that data. I think they have one more year of collecting that. If you guys are interested in learning about that, I could have Melissa Maggio come in and do a biocontrol talk and be able to give you more information on that. But yeah.
Are there significant efforts to revegetate and install erosion sediment control B&Bs on these big fires with the Big Hole? Trail Creek fire, are they?
That's a Forest Service question. I don't know. There's
After the fires of 2000s, you know, the huge effort, and in the end found that the study that was
yeah.
you do some cross-following, you know, of the trees. But gosh, we did logs, we did scrub, we planted roads, and we did tons of stuff. I don't really know that we did that.
Yeah.
And then we have our burn area. It's usually more control.
And I don't know what they're, I think they replace the culverts, you know, and then you really want to this kind of resize it.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
All right. Thank you.
This was their first weed meeting that they've been to? Or has everybody been here before? Few new ones? Okay. Cool.
It's a good one. A lot of people.
Yeah, yeah. Nice. Thanks, guys.
All right. Can I get a round of applause for all our presenters? We'll be back May 17th is our next meeting. Stuart Jennings and the Adafix product. Thank you all. Drive safe. 17th. It's always the third Wednesday.